He is incredibly intelligent. He takes up great positions to receive the ball on the half turn. He can play those quick forward progressive passes that I think very few English players can do. When you compare him to the other players in those areas that are English, I don't think many of them come close to him. He's an elite 1v1 defender on the ground. Could I see him playing for Liverpool? Yeah, I could see him playing for pretty much any top club in Europe because he's that good.
Welcome back to This Is Anfield. I'm delighted to be joined by David Matthews, Crystal Palace season ticket holder and an academy coach at a championship club. Therefore, we hope that he's pretty well placed to speak to us about Liverpool's reported interest in Marc Guehi, the Palace captain, the FA Cup winning captain. David, thanks for joining us today. And do you find it a surprise that Guehi is being linked with Liverpool and that it looks like he could well even end up at Anfield this summer?
Firstly, Matt, thanks for having me on the show, on the show, the podcast. It's greatly appreciated. No, not really. I think he's probably got to the point now in his Palace career where he needs to make that next step, which would naturally be a club competing in the Champions League. I think Palace fans feel that last summer the links to Newcastle and there were a couple of links with Tottenham were probably a bit below where he should be playing. So it hasn't surprised me that a club of Liverpool stature are showing that level of interest because that is his next step. He needs to be playing consistently for not just a team that's competing for honours, but also playing at the highest level of European football, which is the Champions League. And I think he needs to make that step up now, especially with the World Cup less than 12 months away.
Now, financially speaking, it sounds like Liverpool are looking to try and reduce that price. Obviously, there was a big bid that was turned down in January. It seems as though there's no interest in extending his contract. From a Palace point of view, do you need to sell him? Would you prefer to sell him now or to lose him on a free in a year?
I think it depends who you ask. A lot of Palace fans would say, let's just keep him for another 12 months, get another 12 months out of him, then lose him on a free. But from a business perspective, it doesn't really fit the model that we're trying to establish at the club. Our whole model is based on buying young, hungry players from the Championship, which, although Guy came from Chelsea, had just spent a year on loan at Swansea, and then selling them for profit. And it wouldn't really fit the model if we let a player of his calibre leave on a free. It's obviously, we're not going to get the level of income we would have probably got 12 months ago or before then, but we've got to accept now that it's either we get a reduced fee, which could be in that 35, 40 million pound range. I think that's what the club's pushing for, even higher, but I think we've got to be realistic. He's got 12 months left on his deal. And for me, it makes no sense to let that contract run down when he has shown very little or no interest in extending and then letting him walk for free, because trying to place a player of his calibre is going to cost us a substantial amount of money. So it just makes no sense letting him walk for free. So for me, we have to sell him this summer, and hopefully we can come to a deal with Liverpool that works for both. I know Liverpool are trying to obviously get a lower deal as possible, but hopefully a middle ground's met, because we're going to have to replace him as well using those funds, and he's not going to be a cheap. It's not going to be a cheap replacement.
Okay, so style of play. What type of player is he? What's his strengths, especially?
I've been thinking about this the last couple of days. So if I was to profile Guy, in terms of coaching, we profile players in terms of what their strengths and weaknesses are. In terms of Guy's main strength, firstly, his composure and his confidence in his defending. He very rarely gets rattled in situations where he's under pressure. He's an elite 1v1 defender on the ground. His ground duels, in terms of the percentages he wins most games, are normally in the high 80s or 90s. So he very rarely loses his ground duels. And for me, the biggest one's probably just his organisational leadership skills, as well as his understanding of positioning. He very rarely gets exposed, caught out of position. His leadership skills for someone who I believe is only 24 still is quite impressive. He plays older than he is, if that makes sense, in terms of his understanding his position, the way he can command and control his defensive unit. And I think that they're the main areas that stand out for me. As I said, his composure and confidence in terms of the way he can defend is probably the standout. He very rarely gets flustered when he's in situations where he might be under a little bit of pressure, and he tends to figure out solutions very quickly on how to get out of them. out of them.
So an elite player winning his duels on the ground, but
Yeah.
that one concern from a Liverpool perspective is the aerial duels.
Hmm.
And especially when you compare him to Liverpool's currently centre backs, so like Virgil van Dijk, Ibrahim Kanate,
Yeah.
Joe Gomez, even they're all in and around 70% won, whereas Guehi's last season was down at 45%.
Yeah.
You know, it's so tell us about that. Like, is it a real weakness? He's only 6 foot, which is sort of not that tall for a centre half or an elite centre half at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it is a problem. I think it's an area that people were concerned about going into last summer, especially him starting every game for England in the Euros, where set pieces in international football is such a huge part of the game. And I was thinking back to moments this year where he has got exposed, and the one that really came back to my mind, I watched the clip back earlier, was Haaland's first goal in the 2-2 draw with City at Sellers, where Haaland's peeled off to Guy's side on the left and clearly got the leap on him, and Guy couldn't compete. He doesn't get exposed in that area too much, but it's certainly not his strength in terms of winning those aerial duels. The caveat to that is teams are not crossing the ball as much as they were in previous decades gone by, obviously. So that probably plays to his advantage a little bit. But yeah, that is probably the one area of his game which is a weakness or an area of concern, and it's probably not an area that's going to get any better considering he's not going to get any taller. So it's kind of that is the one offset about his game is that he could get exposed aerially in certain situations. But as I said, he manages to get by, and it hasn't happened a lot, but there have been a couple of instances, especially that one with Haaland. I think it was December at Sellers, where Haaland peeled off, got the leap on him, and he just simply couldn't compete. And Haaland scored off that. So yeah, that is one area that would be a concern. But yeah, the trade-offs are the strengths do outweigh the weaknesses for sure.
So strengths, weaknesses. Is there any player or players that you would say that his style of play is comparable with? Anybody he reminds you of?
In terms of the modern game, if we take away the height issue, I think there is a real similarity with Saliba at Arsenal in terms of very comfortable in possession. He very rarely gives the ball away. He can find those progressive passes into the next third of the pitch. Very strong in his 1v1s, very rarely gets beaten, especially on the ground. And his reading and understanding of the game is superb. But Saliba's 6'4". And at the moment in the Premier League, you don't have many centre backs, starting level centre backs, especially in the top echelons in the Premier League who are under 6 foot. I'm not going to say Martinez at United because he's a lot smaller than Guy, and to be fair, he's more erratic in his defending. But I was thinking back to really strong, proven Premier League centre backs in years gone by, and the one that does probably stick to mind is William Gallas. Gallas was 6 foot as well. He could play on the left side and the right side, and he could also cover at fullback. Although I don't think Guys could do much of a job out there. There are similarities in terms of their physical stature, and Gallas was a very good 1v1 defender as well. So that's probably the one I'd go to. But in terms of the modern day centre backs in the Premier League currently playing, I do think there's similarities with the likes of Saliba, but Saliba just has the edge on him in terms of the height. I think Saliba comes in at like 6'4", so there's quite a substantial difference in height. But yeah, that's kind of the player I was thinking about in terms of years gone by.
William Gallas isn't a bad one to be
No.
compared with. Maybe it comes from that Chelsea lineage.
Yeah,
Um, so we've heard a lot about him there as a player. What about as a person? Liverpool have this sort of no dickheads rule. Fantastic.
yeah.
They do a lot of due diligence on their players off of the pitch and what they're like behind the scenes, what their agent and the people that they surround them with.
Mhm.
What can you tell us about as a player, as a person, as much as a player?
I think from everything that we've heard as a fan base about him as a person away from the pitch, no one's got a bad word to say about him. He comes from a very, he's strong in his faith in terms of his beliefs. Comes from quite a religious family. I think he's the kind of person that just represents the community and represents the club really well. You never hear him doing things that would be of a concern. Palace are very similar in doing their due diligence on players coming in. That came from Dougie Freedman's spell at the club as director of football. He was very big on bringing the right characters in. And I think Guy certainly fitted the bill very well in terms of the way he settled into the club. took the captaincy at a young age off Joel Ward because Joel was kind of stepping away from his involvement with the first team. So Guy obviously captains us in the last year or two. And I think he's the kind of player that would be very comfortable signing, not having to worry about any off the field issues. Because as I said, he seems a very sound guy, doesn't kick up any fuss. Even the current situation that we're in, he's not asking to move, but obviously he's open to the opportunity if he could get a move this summer. But I don't think he's the kind of player that's going to be kicking the door down and kicking up a stink if the move didn't materialise. Like the situation last summer where there was a lot of interest from the likes of Newcastle. He got on with the job and he was outstanding last year, despite being, heavily heavily sought after. But he just got on with the job. See, I don't think there'll be any issues there whatsoever.
So you spoke earlier, you kind of mentioned that he's capable of playing left and right centre half, but it seems like he's played almost predominantly as the left centre half. Now, obviously, if Liverpool are bringing him in with maybe one eye on the Konate situation contractually there, do you think that he's capable or comfortable playing as the right-sided centre half?
Yeah, obviously the advantage is he is right-footed. I think there's always this confusion why Guy is always playing on the left. He's not left-footed. He's a right-footed centre-back, but he's very comfortable playing off the left-hand side. As I said, for Palace, he has very rarely, if any times, played on the right because he's predominantly been the left side of a two, or since Glasner's come in, the left side of a three. But I don't see it being too much of a challenge in terms of just slotting over to the right-hand side because he'll be playing off his comfortable foot. The only thing that would be slightly different in terms of the angles of the way he has to defend his 1v1s would slightly be different because he'd be dealing with players coming in off the left and not off the right. But I don't see that being too much of a challenge. It's not like you're asking him to play off from spending most of his career at Palace playing on the right-hand side to then moving over to the left, which would be his weaker side in terms of weaker foot. That would be a little bit more of a challenge, but I don't see it being too much of an issue. No.
You've sold me. It seems like a very good signing for Liverpool. Do you think that what's his ceiling? Is just about to turn 25. He's obviously captained Crystal Palace to an FA Cup. He's a regular for England. Can he become? I think if he comes to Liverpool at the moment, he'll be maybe third choice, but getting plenty of game time. I think that there's probably a thinking that he will get plenty of game time in terms of Konate and Van Dijk both need to be rested a little bit more in this forthcoming season. Do you think that eventually he could establish himself as a starting centre half for Liverpool?
100%. If I was a Liverpool fan, I'd see him as the long-term replacement for Van Dijk anyway. Van Dijk's got a couple of years left, but he's not going to be around forever. And with Guy's age, he's got a good 10 years in him. So I think his ceiling would be to be that person who takes the reins off Van Dijk in terms of one being your starting level centre back, where it's on the left and right side, and then dare I say it, maybe the future club captain. He's captained Palace across the last 2 years at a very young age. As you said, he's already pretty much established himself within the England team, playing every game last year in the Euros, bar the one that he got suspended for because he picked up 2 yellows. So I think his ceiling is pretty high. And providing he continues to show the level of improvements he has and the consistency in his performances, he's a starting level Champions League defender, and he will be for the next 5 or 10 years. So yeah, I don't think there'll be there's too much to worry about if you do manage to secure his signature.
Dave, you sold me on Guehi, but I'm going to come back to the table and steal another one off you. He's one of my personal favourites, Adam Wharton. I love him at Liverpool. There's reported interest dating back to when he was at Blackburn as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's one that Liverpool will look at this summer, but maybe next year. Just tell us briefly then about him. How good is he? How good can he be? And would he be a potential Liverpool player?
Yeah, I think with Wharton, firstly, I don't think there'll be any situation this summer where he does go, and I don't think he needs to go at the moment. He needs to firstly have a full season of Premier League football under him. When he joined us previous January, he had a really strong end to that season, then obviously went away of England at the Euros. He never played, which was slightly disappointing considering the situation that England were in that centre midfield area. I think if he'd been given a chance, I think he would have excelled. But he then came back with a groin injury, which kind of hindered his first 2 months of the season. He then had to have surgery, so he probably didn't get to see the best of Wharton last year. But in terms of what type of player he is incredibly intelligent. He takes up great positions to receive the ball on the half turn. He can play those quick forward progressive passes that I think very little English, very few English players can do, especially in that central midfield area. He can break lines. Doesn't have a goal in him yet, because I don't think he's scored a goal for us yet. But I think that's an area of his game he will look to improve on. But in terms of what he is as a player, he's probably the complete package in terms of what you want from a number six that can sit in front of the back four, back three, and be that connecting point. He is the quarterback that's been used to describe those players in the past. His ceiling could be immensely high. I think we'll keep holding for one more year, and then I think we'll have to accept that there's going to be pretty much most of the. I'd imagine all the clubs in the Premier League who finish in the top 4 or 5 will be in for him, as well as other clubs around the continent. So we just want to enjoy seeing him play for Palace for a whole season, one more year, and then I'll imagine that will be the summer where he does move on, because the level of ability is incredible. He's technically one of the best ball-playing centre midfielders I've ever seen in the Palace shirt. Not that we've had many, but he's certainly up there. And when you compare him to the other players in those areas that are English, I don't think many of them come close to him. And I think if he was to have a full season this year with no injuries and continues where he has been, I think he'll be starting for England alongside Declan Rice next summer. And then I think if that happens, he won't be with us the following season, because he'll probably excel and he'll get the move that probably a lot of people are predicting he'll get around next summer. So, yeah. Could I see him playing for Liverpool? Yeah, I could see him playing for pretty much any top club in Europe, because he's that good. And he's just going to get better with age. Only 21 still, I think, maybe 22. So his ceiling is incredibly high. And he's already shown that he can perform at the highest level in the biggest games, like cup semi-finals, finals at Wembley. So, yeah, he's shown he's got the pedigree.
And next summer, he'll know that he's got a friend in Marc Guehi to help him over the line and help him to accommodate him at Liverpool. So that's absolutely perfect. David, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. It was a
No
delight
worries.
to see Palace win a trophy, and we look forward to playing a club whose fans are not fans that come and sing derogatory songs at Anfield each season. So very much looking forward to the Community Shield as well. Thanks again for your time today.
Cheers, Matt. Have a good one.